Joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He usually joins us on Thursdays at 12:30, but he graciously said I can reschedule for Friday with all the Brian Colangelo news hitting. Steve, how you doing on this Friday?
Good, Josh. How are you?
Steve, I wanted to ask you before we got too deep into it. You've been covering baseball for a long time. What is there something about this baseball season that is a little off? Because I feel like when I'm watching some of these games, I feel like I'm just watching way more batters just swinging through pitches that they should be making contact with. I feel like no matter what game I'm watching, there's way too many guys who are just swinging through pitches in the strike zone.
Yeah, it's kind of an epidemic at this point. The ball is not being put in play. We see the stats, we see all the numbers, and yeah, there are more batters swinging and missing, striking out, batters walking, hitting home runs, and that's kind of, I think, what Commissioner Manfred is trying to address in several ways is to get the game back to where there's action and the ball is out in the field and fielders are making plays and base runners are running around the bases, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of miss, even with all the home runs. And yeah, the strikeouts I think are a huge part of it because pitchers are throwing so much harder and batters really don't care if they strike out. It's just an out to them, and so that's where the game's mentality has kind of moved in that direction.
Do you think some of the poor hitting numbers is also helping the pitching as well be better than it probably should be in some cases?
Yeah, I think so. I think managers have learned that the more fresh arms you can get in there and the less you have a tired starting pitcher, face a team the third time through the order. That's kind of, what the impetus was for the Tampa Bay Rays to do their little opener experiment, so that their nominal starter who comes in the second inning doesn't face the top of the order but gets to go through, the bottom once, twice, and then, it doesn't have to face those key hitters at the top of the order a third time. I think that's really part of it. And as managers use more and more, we see more and more pitchers on the roster at the expense of hitters. That's what we're left with.
Let's jump into the Phillies here. They're 9-12 since May 16th, and this team, they're barely scoring about 3 runs a game over that stretch. There's a lot of struggles for this offense. You only have one guy who is even hitting really well overall in the season. That's Odubel Herrera. Is this offense going to fix itself, or are they going to need somebody to stay competitive?
I'll tell you what, they probably, if they have designs on making the postseason, then I would imagine that the Phillies will need to go out and get another bat. And, we've already seen, some minor trades, John Jay going to the Arizona Diamondbacks. I think that may be the caliber of the bat. I don't know that, there's a lot of talk of, where Manny Machado is going to end up, and maybe the Phillies could get him. I don't know if the Phillies make that big of a splash. But they definitely, I think, need another bat in there, maybe two. When you're having that series where Jake Arrieta provided the only run, on a home run, you have a little problem going on. And I think that, you need to have those guys. You need actually, the Phillies really need Rhys Hoskins to be what he was last year. And I think that would help some of the issues, once he comes off the DL. But yeah, I think they'll definitely, if they have designs on the postseason, they'll need to go out and get somebody, and we'll see some more of those developments as we get a little closer to the trade deadline.
My only question, though, Steve, is what position would you target? Because you gave Santana all this money. You're not going to find a bat to replace him. Cesar Hernandez overall is having a solid season. Shortstop's up in the air because J.P. Crawford just came off the DL. You could argue Franco is having a better year this year than the last 2 years, but that's still not saying much. Hoskins waiting for him to come off the DL, and if you put Altera and Nick Williams' numbers together, they actually function as an okay platoon. So if you're the Phillies front office and you say, okay, we need a bat, what position are you possibly targeting?
I think you're looking at an outfielder, and the Williams-Altair platoon is okay, but you'd really rather have somebody who could be a thumper right in that spot and be in the lineup every single day. So my guess was that they would look for an outfielder, and maybe somewhere they can. The thing is, looking for a bat at shortstop or middle infield, you're not going to find too many of those outside of Manny Machado. So, yeah, that's going to be tough. I think the outfield is probably the easier way to find somebody, and that's where they might look first.
So what about a guy like maybe like a Curtis Granderson? You think he could be an option?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible. The Blue Jays are pretty much, I think, going to go into sell mode at some point here. Granderson. The only thing with him though is that pretty much you got to have him against right-handed pitchers, and he's not a great hitter against lefties. So he does give you on-base percentage. That's good. He's capable in the outfield. That's good. It wouldn't be a surprise. That's not a bad target for them.
You mentioned Manny Machado, and I know a lot of Philly fans, they're pining. They're like, oh, they should just trade for him. Who cares how much it takes? But all I can think of, Steve, is when Mark Teixeira got traded, he was with the Braves, they went to the Angels. Well, guess what? He went to the Yankees in free agency anyway. If I'm the Phillies, why would I give up half of my top prospects to get a guy and then risk him leaving in free agency?
Yeah, that's exactly right, especially when you've got a team that, it looks like there's a solid foundation here and a team that can compete for the future and maybe several years in the future, and that's what you don't want. I think that you want to keep that young base together. I'm sure the Orioles are going to demand a huge price, and with a guy like Machado, they have every reason to think they can get it too, because I'm sure there are a lot of suitors involved in looking at Machado. We had so many of those, 8 or 9 teams in the off season ask the Orioles about Machado and his availability. So I would think that the market will be pretty strong for him. And for the Phillies, yeah, you don't want to chase that one wild card game and blow everything up, the development that you've had for the last couple of years, to blow that up just to chase that wild card game where it's one game, you're in or you're out. I think a little bit of patience is probably the way to go here, and that's why I don't think that we'll see Machado in a Phillies uniform this season.
Steve Gardner from USA Today joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Another name that I've been throwing out for a few weeks, and I know in some ways it's a novelty, but for me, I like what the Phillies have 1, 2, 3 pitching wise. Arrieta, Nola's having a great year, and I like what we've seen most of the season from Pivetta. I would love to see them go out and get a Cole Hamels, not just because he's a former Philly, but because there's no left-hander in this rotation. And I don't think Hamels would cost you that much to get a guy like him. We know in a recent interview, the Phillies were one of the teams that was listed that he cannot block a trade to. So if you're the Phillies, is Cole Hamels a guy that you look at and say, that can be a major asset for us?
Oh, he would certainly be a major asset for the Phillies. The one thing I worry about, though, with Hamels is when you look at the starting pitchers who are available or who could possibly be available on the trade market, there aren't that many difference makers. And when I say difference makers, I mean guys that are going to step into and be part of a postseason rotation. Teams, 1, 2, or 3 starter. And Cole Hamels may be at the top of that list. And if that's the case, you're going to see all of the familiar names, Dodgers, Yankees, and everybody else, again, vying for his services and talking trade. So I think in this case, much like with the Machado situation, the price may be a little bit out of the Phillies' range just for this season. I think you'll see teams that have a chance to maybe go deep into October and win it all as the primary suitors for Hamels. But if anything like that falls through, certainly he could help the Phillies, no doubt.
I know a lot of people are not huge fans at this point of interleague play anymore, but to me, one of my favorite things about interleague play is what's happening this weekend, which is Mets and Yankees. To me, listen, maybe I'm nostalgic or something, but I just love the concept of the regional matchup. The Yankees and the Mets, the Cubs and the White Sox, the Angels and the Dodgers. To me, that's a lot of fun. One of the things with this Yankees team, we come into this season, it's all about Gary Sanchez and Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge. But Steve, this kid Gleyber Torres, in some ways, is carrying this offense. He's just been amazing to watch.
Yeah, a rookie coming in, and I think for Torres, it was a situation where, could you imagine, he was, a year ago, he was the number one prospect in all of baseball, and sort of his season got derailed because of Tommy John surgery. But the fact that you could have the number one prospect in all of baseball from last year come in and play for the New York Yankees, and he's hardly had to face any of the media scrutiny or anything because of all those other stars. And he's been able to come in, hit in the number 9 spot in the order, and just go about his business. And he's been fantastic. I don't think there's been, any kind of the pressure one might expect on a young guy like that coming into New York, and he's been able to thrive. And as you said, with all the things that Sanchez and Stanton and Judge and all those guys are doing, Gleyber Torres is playing just as good as all of those, or just as well as all of those guys. So, yeah, kudos to him and the Yankees for the way that they've handled him and the way that he's responded.
By record, the Yankees are 40-18. You say, oh, they're having a good season. But statistically, you look through the batting lineup, you look through the pitching staff, it's not like there's any guys, a group of guys who are having great elite seasons. So how are they getting it done, Steve? How is this team 40-18 with so many guys with mediocre batting averages and half their pitching staff with high ERAs?
Well, it's the fact that they're so deep, and if you can get through a Brett Gardner and an Aaron Judge and a Giancarlo Stanton, there's Gary Sanchez. It's so hard to get through that lineup without getting burned. And with Greg Bird coming back, he gives them another bat in there. The way that Miguel Andujar has played as another rookie coming in there and starting every day at third base, and Gregorius, the whole lineup, it's just so deep and so hard to get through there. I think the pitchers know that if they can get past the 5th or the 6th inning, the Yankees bullpen can take over. That's another strength of theirs. And at this point, it's just that there's no real weakness in this Yankees team, and that's something that's very encouraging for Yankee fans. And the best thing about it too is that if they do have some injuries, they can have some guys to fill in, and it's worked out really well for them this year. And looking at the Yankees and the Red Sox, how they're dueling so far in the American League East, this is going to be fun to watch as we get into September.
2 months in, what are your thoughts on Aaron Boone?
I think he's been okay. It's nice, and I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing. It's nice to have the kind of talent that he has at his disposal. But he hasn't, unlike some of the other first-year managers where we've seen lots of things to criticize, I think Boone has been relatively uneventful in terms of the things that he's been able to do, and no controversies to really to speak of. That says a lot for him, because I was a little bit skeptical. No managerial experience coming in there with such a high-profile team like the Yankees. He's done a great job and a better job, I think, than anybody could have expected.
You mentioned the no managerial experience. It's Boone, it's Alex Cora in Boston, it's Gabe Kapler in Philadelphia. Before Dave Roberts took the Dodgers job, he was another one of those guys. Is that the new trend now, that they're not really going for the guy with the experience and the years, but they're going for a certain personality type with managers?
I think more and more we see that managers' main responsibility is to manage the clubhouse and the personalities, because the players are, as we've seen over the course of the years, it used to be the manager was the dominant figure, in the Billy Martin era, that sort of thing. He was the main personality. I think the players now kind of rule the clubhouse, and the manager's job is to keep harmony, to keep everybody happy and producing as best they can. Joe Torre was a master at that, and I think in terms of strategic contributions, you've got the front offices, you've got the analytics, you've got the data, and also I think an underrated thing is bench coaches and the experience on the coaching staff to be able to help with some of the strategic things. So yeah, I think it's important, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of successful first-year managers come in and do things and have that kind of success. So yeah, I think it is a trend, because it's more of a team effort, I feel, rather than just the manager being the be-all, end-all there in the dugout.
Steve Gardner from USA Today joining us on the Boardwalk on the hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Steve, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time as always. The Phillies are going to be playing the Brewers this weekend. The Brewers at 37-25. Are the Brewers the best team in baseball that nobody's talking about?
I'll tell you what, that's a pretty fair statement because everybody, we're amazed at the way that the Braves and the Phillies have started out strong. But the Brewers didn't really get off to that great start, and you had the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Pirates were up at the top of the standings for a while. That Central has always been pretty much of a jumble, but when you see what the Brewers have done, have come out and have the best record in the National League, I don't think a casual baseball fan, if you asked who's the best team in the National League in terms of record, that the Brewers would be the first one that would come out of their mouth. So, yeah, I think one of the things that they've done in the offseason, the front office recognized that this is a team that's strong and has, the foundation of a winning team. They went out and got Lorenzo Cain, went out and got Christian Yelich, and now they're a much better team. I think the Brewers are for real, and we will see them go down to the wire and be a playoff contender, possibly with a chance to move on and get to the championship series or be a World Series contender.
Give him a follow on Twitter at Steve A. Gardner, joining us here. He usually joins us on Thursdays, but we moved him to Friday. We appreciate that. Steve A. Gardner on Twitter, a great follow for all of your baseball knowledge you need. Steve, appreciate the time and hope you have a great weekend.
You too, Josh.